Hello, this is Sarita, and I'm here to help you understand the truth about who you are. So what I wanted to do in this video was answer a question that somebody sent me. And it's kind of a complicated question. I'm going to read it out loud. And there are many ways that it could be answered. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on two distinct perspectives when answering the question. But I'll go right ahead and read the question so you can hear it. And I'm not going to say who the question's from because I don't know if they want their name read out loud. So, dear Sarita, I love your energy and what you speak of. So please forgive me for asking an angry question directed at the universal intelligence. Why is there suffering? If it is all about unconditional love, why are innocent children born into poor villages where they have to starve and fall sick to parasites, bacteria, etc., that are part of this planet's ecosystem? Why are innocent souls born into war-torn zones with embedded historical vendettas and violence from day one? Why? What is the purpose of this awful game where we have to discover the divine unconditional spirit? Why not just be loving and unconditional from the very beginning? Thank you for considering these questions. I want to connect with the divine, but at the same time, I see so much suffering around. I cannot understand why we have to have this tiring and trying search for that elusive divine bliss. And yeah, I hear you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer this question from two perspectives. And I think we need to look at reality from two perspectives always, because there's the little me, us, and there's the unlimited, unconditional us, which is part of creator consciousness. And I think it's very hard for human beings to live in this reality with a perspective that is rooted in that unlimited creator consciousness, because obviously we're running around in our daily lives and we've got things to sort out and children to feed and food to put on the table and, you know, relationships to have, and it's complicated and messy and chaotic. And obviously we are living in polarity. And I think what this question really is referring to is the nature of polarity and the end of that spectrum, which is so painful, which is rooted in suffering. And obviously when we're here running around having our little lives, feeling 3D-ish and disconnected from the divine, trying to survive in our survival instinct, it doesn't really make much sense. So what I would say from this perspective, well, sorry, that's my phone reminding me to do something. What I would say from this perspective is, well, there are many things I could say, but the primary one is that we are living in a third dimensional reality. That means we are limited by our perceptions, and we are locked into duality and paradox always. So basically what we're doing as multisensory beings is we're feeling and experiencing ourselves in that polarity. And obviously polarity has two ends. I always like looking at it like it's a stick. It's two ends of a stick, but we are the stick. So we have the dark and the light, and everything that's happening on this planet is the stick. It all has the stick in it, has polarity. So we have the suffering and the love in everything until we can transcend that polarity by expanding in our awareness and broadening and opening our perspective to perceive higher dimensions beyond this third dimensional realm. But most of us are living with a kind of narrowed survival instinct perspective. So we're experience all of those contrasts along that stick all of the time, because we are the stick, basically. And in the third dimension, it appears as if human beings need to experience the full spectrum of that polarity in order to ascend in their conscious awareness. So it appears as if humans actually expand their perception by experiencing suffering. So the suffering at one end of that spectrum makes you realize that there's another end to be had, and that's because human beings tend to need to be completely uncomfortable before they'll even attempt at changing everything. And a really good example of this is when you see people in very abusive relationships. This is a real generalization, but let's say, you know, someone's being beaten up by their partner. Other people around them can't fathom why they don't just leave. And this is a very common thing. And I'm using this as a microcosm to describe the macrocosm of human behavior. And it's because human beings don't like venturing into unfamiliar territory, because their survival instinct gets activated very strongly. So they'd rather stay in a horrible, uncomfortable situation for as long as possible, because it's the familiar, until they're literally forced through that discomfort to go and explore other possibilities. Okay. And that's because human beings in this third dimension are very much rooted in their brains. And I'll go on to that in a moment. So their nervous systems and their brains are wired for survival. And that's because we perceive that we are living in this material realm. And that's because our focus is narrowed. And when people are in survival mode, perceiving that they are in a material realm and can therefore be killed, so they're in danger all of the time, and they don't realize that they're a multidimensional eternal being, they will do anything to survive. And that's why you see the horrors that this person is talking about: war, people stabbing each other over a loaf of bread, you know, all of these kind of behaviors is because people become very self-centered when they're in fight or flight or survival mode. When you're in fight or flight, when you think you've got to survive, you are literally running from a lion, and you have no capacity to pause and help someone else or give them a loaf of bread if you happen to have a spare crumb. It just doesn't work like that. That's what the survival instinct does. That's what a belief in the material third dimensional realm does to human beings. So what we're seeing with all of this kind of behaviors are people very much rooted in their survival instincts, their selfish, self-centered instincts. And literally, when you look or perceive the energy fields of people who are rooted in survival, their focus is narrow, and the electromagnetic field around their bodies are tiny. And I've even seen people with kind of electromagnetic fields that look like very pointed eggs, you know. And by contrast, a Tibetan monk, for example, who's heart-centered, their electromagnetic field would look very massive and expanded and huge. And that's because they're open. They're not constricted by survival. So it affects how energy is moving and working on this planet. And if you've got 7.5 billion people on the planet, and 7 billion of them are in survival, they're all like fighting just to survive. That they'll do anything to survive, and they can't perceive that there's any kind of reality beyond the material realm. So they're behaving like that. So the question is, why are we only perceiving this material realm? Now, that moves on to a subject matter that I talk a lot about, and it's the archonic influence upon this planet. So I've referred to this many times, what I perceive is that we are living in a hologram. It's like a laser light show. And if you like, as the woman who asked me the question is referring, it's like a game, but kind of a horrible, icky sort of game if you're in survival mode. So basically, we are living in an inverted matrix. And what I mean by inverted is that it is contrary to our true nature. And as referred to in the question, our true nature is divine, limitless, and expanded. But when we come into this third dimensional reality, where energy, the whole totality of energy, becomes very condensed in order to give the appearance of a material realm, what happens is our energies become constricted, and it's almost like we're being held in this matrix, which is the inversion of what we are. And the matrix is controlled by an archonic force, which is the antithesis of what it means to be a human being, bearing in mind that a human being is made in the likeness and image of the creator. Okay. So there's a force on this planet, which I call the archons. They've had many other names throughout time. You could call them a demonic force. They're called Wetiko mind virus. They've got many names. And basically that force, which came into being at the same time as Earth was birthed, is the antithesis of, if you like, creation. It's a force of anti-creation. It's self-destructive by nature, and it cannot self-sustain. So what it needs to do is it needs to feed off an energy source, exactly like the Matrix film, which is a brilliant analogy because most people have seen it and can understand. It needs to feed off an energy source, which is unlimited. That's us. Our energy source looks like an infinity symbol. It can never die, and it's made of thermodynamic free energy, which just self-perpetuates and becomes more and more powerful and can birth universes. That's literally what you're made of. And we can also call that force love. Okay, I'm sorry that the camera is bouncing up and down. I'm not at home in France in my office. I'm in a tiny little B&B in England because I'm here helping my son for 3 weeks. So the camera's not very good, the sound's not very good, and the film is all wonky, but bear with me. We're in 3D. So there are these two forces on the planet. One is the archonic force and one is us. Okay, so one is unlimited, is love. One is self-destructive, and if you like, is its opposite, hate or darkness. Okay, one is expanded consciousness, one is restricted consciousness, and needs to siphon consciousness in order to survive, because one is in survival mode. We don't actually need to be in survival mode because we're infinite beings. It's just a misconception that we're in survival mode, and that misconception is created through the inverted matrix, the laser light show, by the archons to keep us mind controlled and feeling like we're limited, so that we don't notice that our consciousness is perpetually being siphoned by this anti-divine force. And the electromagnetic field that I mentioned earlier, when one is sovereign and understands that one is divine, that electromagnetic field cannot be permeated by an anti-divine force. Okay, it's really hard to siphon consciousness of someone that's sovereign. And that's why the inverted matrix was created by the archonic force. And what they do is they use metaphor and imagery and sound and frequencies and light to make us believe that we need to be in a perpetual state of fear. And of course, this is completely obvious to anyone who's waking up. You've only got to look at the news for two minutes and you're going to start to feel pretty freaked out and anxious. And basically what anxiety and fear does is it kind of creates cracks, if you like, or fissures in your biofield. And then that's how the archonic force gets in and begins to siphon your infinite energy source to feed them so that they can stay alive. So that's why we're in an inverted matrix. And there are layers to that matrix. And I've explained also what I think those layers are. Now, I'm not going to go into that into this video, but what I'll do is I'm going to put a link to another video that explains why there is an archonic force on this planet. But basically, there's an archonic force on this planet because when the planet Gaia Sophia was birthed, simultaneously, because Gaia Sophia, and I'm not going to go into the details of this because it's just too complicated and long, because if you like, Gaia Sophia fell out of her realm into this one and birthed into Gaia. So she was falling. So in other words, it was kind of like an accident. Because she was falling, there was a kind of destruction going on. And so as she fell and birthed into Gaia, so as Gaia was created, so as creation was coming in, because she was falling, destruction was coming in at the same time as creation. And what happened was, in a nutshell, the consciousness of Gaia Sophia, which is our Earth, pushed away this destructive force, and it became an aborted force. Okay. And that is the archonic force. And because it was pushed away, so it was separated and aborted, that's why that force is a self-destructive force. It's an aborted force by its nature, but it's also intrinsically connected and attached to the creation of Gaia itself. So it's like, that's why there are these two forces. And that's why this planet is in polarity, because of the two forces that came out of its creation, one aborted, one created. Okay. And what's happened over time is that force, the archonic force, the aborted force, which obviously feels, if a force can feel something, it feels rejected, abandoned, it's perpetually being pushed away, it's dying. It feels like it's got to survive at all costs. And what it's done is it's infiltrated humans who mirror the image of Gaia Sophia, who mirrors the image of creation. It uses our brains. It's taken over our brains and our nervous systems and made us believe through the inverted matrix that we have to survive at all costs. So basically, that's our ego. It's made us believe that we're separate, and we've given all of our control and our power away to the ego, and we've forgotten, because of the illusion of this inverted matrix and the archonic force that is constantly, if you like, attacking us and siphoning conscious from us, we've forgotten our true nature, which is divine and in the image of the creator. And so that's why there are these two forces on the planet. And that's why people behave like this all of the time. And of course, when you're talking about the elites and the power structures that control the matrix and run the earth, they don't realize that they in turn are being controlled by the archonic force, which is kind of behind them and hidden. And so they're always trying to control us through these fear-based programs. And the thing with the matrix is, when you can see the matrix, which I've began to perceive a while ago, it literally locks into our brains. It's like we're all wired in through light and frequency via our brains in this matrix. But the true matrix that holds us in the frequency bandwidth of Gaia is actually through our heart centers, okay, with our feet planted in the earth and our head pointing towards the cosmos and the stars. So that's the true matrix, and the frequency bandwidth that we should be aligning to. But the one that we've got locked into is the one in our heads, the archonic force. So basically what we've got is we've got elites being controlled by the archonic force, controlling us to think that we're in this massive survival game all of the time. And that's why things are utterly horrific for the most part on this planet to many people who are sensitive and can see what's going on. That's why it looks so awful. And within this matrix, this inverted matrix, there is a reincarnation loop trap, okay? And basically I've done a video on this as well, and I'll put a link up here. But basically what that trap is doing is it's causing children to be born, just like the question asks, into war-torn countries or into starvation, and to go through their lives in survival mode, working off karma and all of this kind of thing, which is a massive misconception. And I'm not talking about the law of the universal law of cause and effect. I'm talking about karma and the misconceptions of karma, and why we reincarnate again and again into just disastrous and difficult and traumatized lives that allow the archonic force to siphon our consciousness once again from even in the womb. Okay, so that's why we are seeing all of this stuff. And as I've said, it's very hard to move yourself out of survival mode when you've got all of these forces trying to control you. So that's what's happening on this planet. And it takes an enormous amount of discipline, self-mastery, willpower, and desire and love to overcome the illusion of what we think is real. So that now leads me to looking at this from the secondary perspective, which is much nicer. So basically, the secondary perspective is that everything, archons, Gaia Sophia, us, this computer that I'm talking to you on, everything in all of the multiverse comes from creator consciousness, which is love, absolute, unconditional, divine love. And no matter how we got here or why we got here, what's happening is we are perpetually moving back towards that state of divine consciousness and actualization, that we are all one with everything and that we can create anything and everything. All of us are moving towards that, the archons, everyone. So that's the evolution of being, and that's perpetual. And so that's why, for example, this person who asked the question, or me, or all of you, are working towards being in our hearts. We can feel that there's something beyond what we perceive, and we have a real felt sense of that. And it's like a longing that calls us, but you know, but it's intangible to us, if you like, in a funny sort of way, from where we are, rooted in separation in this inverted matrix. But there's this evolutionary pull towards it. Evolution is always expanding in its awareness and perception, and we are always moving back to the creator. And the creator doesn't have any judgment about what we choose to create, or why we got here, or why we behave in certain ways, or what our experiences are. The creator has no judgment around that. It doesn't care. It, he, she, the creatrix, whatever, however you want to look at the creator, okay? Creator consciousness, love. It loves so unconditionally that if we keep choosing suffering through our thoughts and our feelings, or the matrix, or not bothering to strive for discipline or whatever, it will honor that without judgment immediately. So whatever we think and feel, even if it's destructive, creator consciousness goes, have this, beloved. If that's what you're choosing, have it. And it will keep giving us whatever we want because it's expanded creation. And so are we. And the minute we think about something that we want, even if it's unconscious and awful. So, for example, if you're absolutely rooted in unworthiness because something happened to you when you were a kid and you think you don't deserve anything, and so you can't pay your bills, and you keep thinking that and feeling that, the creator will go, here you are, beloved. Here is what you're thinking and feeling. Here, have it again. Oh, have it again, have it again. It has no judgment. It's unconditional love, and will keep sending you or reflecting back at you, because this is a reflective reality here, exactly what you think and feel without judgment. And similarly, if you decide through your mastery and self-discipline and act of will and open-heartedness that you do deserve to be a billionaire on a yacht and sail around the world looking at whales and dolphins, it will give you that. If that's what you truly believe, think and feel, that's what you get without condition. There's no judgment about having money or not having money. That's unconditional love. And I believe that one of the reasons that we're here on this planet is so that we can remember that we are the creators and practice making these choices, whether they hurt us or not. And through the attachment or the experience of suffering or not, we make another choice. And we're just making choices in every now moment. And each of those choices is aligning us to another experience, another sensory experience and perception, which is evolutionary and taking us back to creator consciousness ultimately. And I'm sure when we get to creator consciousness and we're oneness with everything, we're going to go, oh, I feel like having a fractal experience and being separate again and doing it all again. That was a brilliant roller coaster. Here we go. I don't know what we're going to do, but that is why I believe that there is suffering on this planet. And I do actually, at this point in time, think that there is a potential for the mass consciousness on this planet to shift. That is why we are seeing all these crazy things happening at the moment. I think we've hit 100th monkey and people are waking up to the realization that we can make different choices that hurt us and others less. And the reason that we're waking up is because we've suffered so much. It's literally driving us nuts and we don't want to sit in that familiar anymore. And so I believe that we're hitting a higher level of consciousness, a broadening of perception and expanded consciousness. And this will move us into a fifth dimensional consciousnness that you've heard me talk about and other people talk about. And basically, fifth dimensional consciousness has no polarity in it. It's basically it's oneness. It's an experience of oneness. I'm not saying it is oneness because I believe we've got more dimensional realities to go yet, but there's no time in there. So time in this reality is an enslavement mechanism, and fifth dimensional consciousness, and there's no time. So you're not going to get bogged down with the past or upset or depressed about your past. Similarly, you're not going to be anxious about your future. You start to understand that you're a creator and everything happens instantaneously. And because things are happening instantaneously, we're all perceiving what everybody else is thinking and feeling moment by moment. So telepathy becomes a very real thing that many of us are experiencing already now as we're shifting in our level of consciousness. So evolution is taking us into a higher level of consciousness. But of course, there are people on this planet that are not ready or don't want to shift their perspective yet. They're very much rooted in wanting to be controlled by the archonic force. They want to be in the familiar. They believe in the material realm, and they're very much rooted in survival. And that's their choice. So the unconditional love doesn't go, oh, mass consciousness is rising on the planet, and because you're choosing something different, you have to go with them. It doesn't do that. So what we're witnessing is a splitting of realities. In fact, it's pretty much, in my opinion, we're in the split. The splits happen, and there's this chasm in between that many of us are still navigating, actually. But it's this other way of being, this third dimensional way of being, to me, is falling away. It just doesn't seem to even belong to anything anymore. It's like watching a film, which you know isn't real, and you're in this new reality. So that's what it feels like to me. This is their choice. They're not ready yet. They don't want to move. They're good with the archons, la la la, all of the rest of it. And then a lot of people, there's a mass awakening, are choosing this new reality. And what's happening is that Gaia Sophia is birthing forth at a higher vibrational rate, which means there's literally more light coming in, which means that our planet is becoming less dense, less material. So then we begin, and so that means, because we are Gaia Sophia also, we begin to perceive ourselves as less dense and less material. We begin to perceive ourselves as more expanded, more like in the image of the Creator. So I'm going to leave it there on a positive note. I hope that has made sense. It's not an easy ride. I'm not sure it was ever meant to be. I don't know why we're here, but I can certainly feel where we're going, and I hope that's inspired some of you. And I truly believe that discipline, self-mastery, being in the heart, expanding your consciousness, and having this deep knowing that you are the creator and unlimited and love will help you to navigate your way through suffering more easily. Suffering, it's a choice. Thank you very much for listening.